Following our headhunter bag and our double rope video, we got lots of requests for people asking us, how am I supposed to train on the double end bag, or as some people call it, the speed ball? Well, today you were heard, and I'm gonna run you guys through my lesson for how I introduce and teach the tactics that you can use on the double end bag so that you can practice them, you can hone them, and you can have success when you fight. So I'm gonna introduce the double end bag to you the same way I would one of my athletes. We're gonna go through a series of drills that will slowly incorporate all of the different things that you can practice on this bag to help you have success. So the first thing you need to recognize is this is a rhythm game. If you listen, that's the rhythm that this bag wants you to work at. Whether you're being offensive, whether you're being defensive, whether you're moving, whether you're countering, that's the pace this bag wants to adhere to. A big part of your success as a boxer is learning to work at a pace. This is easy when you're shadow boxing or hitting a swinging heavy bag at your own pace. Learning to anchor to somebody else's pace is hard, even if it's slower than the pace you work at. So the very first drill is you need to find this rhythm with your jab. So when I set myself up on the double end bag, everything I do is right from jab range, just shy of me fully extending my arm. Any punches that I throw are gonna be technically correct and mechanically strong. I throw my 3 like this, I throw my 6 like this, and when I get the rhythm down, as I slowly introduce this to you, you'll find that the bag comes to you, you don't reach for the bag. If you're struggling with your rhythm, you can start this small, right at the end of your arm, but what I want you to do is I want you to build to throwing a proper, full jab. Once you've found that rhythm with your jab, you're gonna try to bring in your cross, another straight punch that shouldn't interfere or interrupt the kind of rhythm and the bounce of the bag. So if I do this correctly, I'm not just reaching my arm out, I need to turn my hip over as well. So the next drill, you're gonna dribble with the jab and then bring in a correct, strong cross. When you can go from the 1 to the 2, you want to make this a continuous drill, and I want you to go from the 2 back to the jab. All right, this is our first bottleneck. We've learned the 1, we've learned the 2, we can keep our base and keep our rhythm while punching correctly. Now we're gonna introduce the 3. The biggest mistake people make with the 3 is they slap with this shot. They reach for this shot as if the bag isn't bouncing. You need to remember that if you're doing this correctly, you're gonna have hit this hard enough with the 1 and the 2 from straight punch range that it comes in to the path of your 3 when you turn those hips over. Notice, even though this doesn't give me a lot of feedback, I still turn my hips on that 3. I throw a technically, mechanically correct punch. If I do this right, the bag isn't bouncing back and forth like this because I hit it on the end of a bounce. It hits this big counterclockwise orbit. This is going to be important when it comes to our defense later. If I hit this correctly with my 3, it's got a big orbit, a big swing, and when I throw my 2 again, I can catch it anywhere on that return. After it goes away from me, it's gonna catch and it's gonna come back, and I'm just gonna let it run into that right hand. So I've now shown I can go from the 2 to the 3. Now I wanna show I can go from the 3 to the 2. And the next progression of this, once I've shown I can do that, is to juggle this back and forth between that cross and that lead hook with good hips and good footwork and balance. So we've gotten through our jab, our cross, and our lead hook. And the good news is that's great. The bad news is those are the easy ones. So let's get to some of the harder ones now. Our next punch, we're gonna skip our 4 and our 5, and we're gonna go right to our 6. When I'm throwing my 2, I can hit this anywhere on its return to me. When I'm throwing my 6, I have a much narrower slice of this orbit where I need to place this punch. If I'm early, I'm gonna miss it. If I'm late, I'm also gonna miss it. I have to hit this right as it is the closest to me at the zenith of this curve. When I'm doing this, I'm not punching out like an old-timey bare knuckle boxer. I'm coming up, and I should ideally chip this bottom quarter just like somebody's chin. So let's see. The next punch I like to teach in the system is the 4. When I throw my 4, I'm throwing it again as the speedball comes into range. I'm not reaching and slapping with this shot with my door knocking knuckles. I'm making sure that my elbow's tight, 90 degrees, and this runs into my punching knuckles. I can do this following the 3 when it's on its orbit, or I can do it following some straight punches, as long as I hit it hard enough to get back to me. If I do this correctly, you can see this clockwise orbit. That's going to be important for our defense later, just like with the 3. Our final punch is going to be our 5. So I can throw the 5 very easily off of the 1-2-5, like I'm fighting a southpaw. Just like with the 6, I'm not punching out like an up jab with this. I'm punching up. And ideally I hit it hard enough that it comes into range that I can just chip the bottom of this. Now, the 1-2-5 is nice, it's a good way to learn, but usually the expectation is that you can throw a 1-1-5. So let's try that. If you've got all your offense down on this, these are the easiest ways to set up these shots. But if you understand the positions and you understand the timing, you should be able to sequence these together in a variety of ways, even though this is the quickest way, I think, to learn them. So if you watch me freestyle a little bit with just my offense, you can see that I can throw these in a wide variety of ways. If we understand the rhythm and the timing necessary for our offense, we can move on to some defense. So the first thing, you want to make sure that your elastic has enough play that the speedball can actually get to you. So if you watch me from the side here, if I hit this with a hard 1-2, it should be able to reach me and hit me back. This makes me know when I move, I'm actually getting out of the way of this strike. So when I hit this with straight punches or uppercuts, it moves in and out and it acts just like a straight punch would. So I should be able to slip this to either side. I always teach people to throw the 1-2 and slip to their closed side first, because this goes with your momentum. It's easier before learning to throw the 1-2 and then slip to your open side. Let's see them. Being able to slip at the end of a combo is good, but slipping is a specific defense designed to counter your opponent. So now, the next part of this drill is to learn to slip and then counter. So I like to teach the 1-2 slip 6. If you've got the 1-2 slip 6, now we're gonna do the 1-2 slip 3. This is the first time that we're alternating between offense, defense, and back to offense, which means even without the feedback of dribbling the speedball, you need to keep track of that rhythm in your mind. So the ultimate test to see if you can slip and rip here is to put both of these combos together. So I like to test my athletes with the 1-2 slip open 6, slip close 3. Let's do it. Again. If you've mastered the slipping, now you can leverage a slip, an elbow side slip, into a counter or into an exit. So additionally, after that nice strong 1-2, we need to be able to slip to an angle. So when I'm slipping to an angle, I need to step with my foot on the slip. I don't want to be stepping on the punch, though obviously you can do that in a fight. I want you to prove that you're quick enough to get where you need to go on this bag on rhythm, not layering these things together yet. So I always imagine when I'm moving my head, it's not about shying away from a punch, okay? It's about aggressively establishing a better head position, especially on a bag that's moving quick. I see people all the time, they throw a hard 1, 2, 3, pop, pop, pop. And then when they do their defense, that's no good. You should have the same aggression, the same intensity, the same explosiveness with your defense and your head position as you do with your offense, because you have to expect an opponent's gonna be trying to take your head off. So you gotta be aggressive. I always think I hit this guy with 2 punches, bang, bang, and then I'm headbutting his buddy. Bah! Nice and aggressive. Let's see it. Same thing to the other side. So if you've been following along and holding yourself to the standard that I've described, when you hit this with hooks, it should make a big orbit, a wide circle. This is important because this is going to allow us to practice blocking hooks and returning fire off of those blocks. Before I teach you how to block and counter hooks using the double end bag, we need to talk about a term called training scars. We've talked about training scars before. Training scars is the idea that the differences between the equipment you use to train and how you actually execute techniques and tactics in a fight can get you in trouble. It's important to know, highlight these differences so that you recognize when a technique is acting as a placeholder for the technique you will actually be using in a fight. A good example of a training scar would be when somebody's hitting the heavy bag and they're letting the bag hold them up. When in a real fight, if they threw those shots, they'd fall ass over elbows and they'd be left vulnerable. This is a training scar, a bad habit you pick up in the gym on equipment that will get you in trouble in a fight. The training scar we need to be aware of on the double end bag is how we block. When I hit this, even with a hard hook, it's not gonna reach the back of my jaw, it might reach the front of my face. So in a real fight, I would block tight on the side of my head. Using the double end bag, I'm actually gonna allow my elbow to protrude forward a little bit so the bag has something to bounce off of. This is not something you do in a fight, but it's something you do here. Let me show you an example. This plays out the same way with my right hook, blocking on the other side. If I do this correctly, this should bounce off of my arm, and it should give me an opportunity to throw with the same hand. So if I'm practicing this, the 2 combos I'm practicing are going to be 1, 2, 3, block left, 3. And 1, 1, 4, block right, 4. Let's give them a shot. So now I have access to all 6 of my punches. I can block front and I can block on either side of my head. I can slip left and right, and I can slip to angles. If we put all this together into a freestyle, you can see we have a huge amount of freedom on the double end bag. So these are all of our fundamental techniques using the double end bag, but one of my favorite drills actually has me lessening the tension on this so I can imagine staying busy in an in-fight. So if you look up here, I've got 2 different elastics on this, and I like to remove one of them. By removing one of them, I change the rhythm and the play on the bag. It doesn't move as quickly and it moves farther. So this gives me a little more wiggle room to play around. I like to get cozier, no longer at jab range, but into the middle distance. And from here, I can practice my guard, I can practice catching and pitching a little more fluidly. So I've just run you wonderful folks through how I introduce the double end bag to my athletes. We start just finding that rhythm and dribbling it with the jab, and then we build all the way into blocking and slipping and catching and pitching and countering and pairing our punches. There's a lot to be learned here. If I go to a new boxing gym where I'm going to be sparring, I'm not threatened by the guys that sound like thunder and lightning on a big stationary heavy bag. But I am always impressed and mindful and watchful of the guys that look good on the double-ended bag, because it means they understand rhythm, they understand distancing and timing, they're not falling in on their shots, and they can sequence between offense, defense, and movement fluidly. These are the guys to keep an eye on, and you can be one of them. Hopefully you learned something today and you can have success when you fight.